All right, welcome back to episode 7 of the 10 Tabs Open podcast. This is Alex Howell, and thank you so much for joining us again. We have been on quite the hiatus. My wife and I moved from one house to the other to the next. And because of that, we've not had a few episodes in between. We actually had one recorded, and Corey is going to come back on tomorrow. But it completely got corrupted, so I had to go out and buy a whole new freaking computer and setup to make it happen. But all of that being said, we're back on, and today we had on Sean O'Toole, who is the treasurer of the Missouri Libertarian Party. He worked 25 years as an agricultural commodities trader at the Kansas City Board of Trade, the Minneapolis Grain Exchange, the Chicago Board of Trade, and currently he works as a software developer in Kansas City. I got to tell you, I met Sean because I ran for the 5th District House of Representatives in 2018 and got absolutely curb stomped by Emmanuel Cleaver. But Sean he was there pretty much all the time at the meetings of the Kansas City Libertarian Party. And I noticed that he was just one of those guys that everybody else in the room, when a subject was brought up that had a lot of appeal and a lot of different points, there would be a moment where it would stop and would go to him. And he would always have something very intelligent, very philosophical to say. And so I was very, very excited to be able to book him. And it's taken about 2.5, 3 months to actually get him on, just schedules and that kind of thing. But it was a very good conversation. Hope you guys can last through the whole thing because it was a 2+ hour conversation. But the guy knows what he's talking about. Hyper intelligent individual. Sean O'Toole, Missouri Libertarian Party. Hope you guys enjoy, and thanks for sticking around.
Are these mics? You're probably driving some power into them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
Yeah, you get a lot better clarity.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I picked up one. God, what was it? And we're on. But I picked up one probably 6 years ago, and it was one of those, like, I started a podcast. I thought I was going to do it, and I realized that me talking into a microphone for like 15 minutes, I was like, I'm going to bore the shit out of somebody.
It's hard to do.
Yeah. So I was like, well, what are we going to do? So then I just listened to and watched a bunch of podcasts, and I loved the people that they were able to bring on. The first one I found was Joe Rogan,
Sure.
Who'd probably be one of the better libertarian candidates you could ask for, because
No doubt.
there's not really much he hasn't done or has an opinion on. But it was just one of those things. Like, I'm just watching, like, as much as I would watch the interview, I'm like, okay, so what do they have? They have 2 mics. They got that set up, the audio set up. Okay, I'm going to try it now.
Yep.
And it was interesting because the first people I reached out to were friends of mine that had good stories, and I talked to them a lot in the past, and I was like, well, I'll just bring them on and they can talk about whatever they want to talk about. You figure out pretty quickly that a lot of people aren't really conversationalists. The people that can entertain an entire room and that kind of thing can be a little quiet when you get them one-on-one and they know that they're being recorded. But then, you have somebody like my buddy Corey, who he's a history teacher at the Barstow School, and he's working on his doctorate from Mizzou. And one of the smartest guys I know, and he's probably, if I had to sit down and just talk to somebody for 5 hours, it would be that guy, because he can just go.
Yep.
Like, here's my subject, here's what we're talking about, and I'm going to make it sound, I mean, he's in the perfect position as a teacher, because he makes this thing, what he's talking about, interesting, and he can relate to the people that he's talking to, which are, freshmen and sophomores in high school that need somebody relatable.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sean O'Toole, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'm sure we'll go into a little bit more about your position and kind of where you came into this, but I really wanted to have you on because every single time that I'd go to one of the meetings for the Kansas City Libertarian Party, I felt like there would be conversation, and then when somebody needed a moment of clarity, when somebody needed somebody calm, they could actually explain something, go through it, and just sit back and say, it's not that I'm not invested in this, but we need to bring it back to the actual issue. All eyes went to you. And so every meeting that I've gone to that you've been there, it's just been like, okay, I've got to get this guy here.
Well, thank you. I think I'm probably good at faking authority more than anything, which is sometimes what it takes.
Well, I mean, if you have the ability to do that, then at least you're the person in the room that can kind of guide. I mean, if you're faking authority, you're still being the authority on something.
Well,
so
that's right.
as long as you kind of follow through with it, and you're involved in, the Missouri Libertarian Party what is your position in the Missouri?
I'm the treasurer of the party, have been since, I believe, 2011.
Which makes sense because you run for auditor of the state of Missouri.
Right.
Yep.
Run for auditor twice, run for treasurer twice. I like low-profile offices.
Yep.
I'm not a natural crowds person. I'm not the rah-rah guy who's going to stand up in front of a crowd and bring people up to an elevated pitch. We have people that are better at that than me. I tend to be, like it or not, I tend to be more of the policy guy.
Yeah.
And can patiently go through and say, well, this is why we should be doing it this way, and why that way perhaps has failed.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of roles tend to work out well in the treasurer's race and the auditor's race. And the other side of it, auditor especially, I think is really an office that should be held by somebody who's not in a major party.
Yeah.
I think I have a real strong opinion about that. And the treasurer's side, if I have a political hero, and I really don't have political heroes because I really don't like politics. I'm a libertarian because I don't like politics.
Yeah.
And if I have a hero, it's a guy named Bob Matson.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably still alive today, probably 10, 12, 14, 15 years older than me. He was the state treasurer of Minnesota when I lived up there. I'm going to say maybe in my 30s, something like that. Matson's father had been a state representative, and Minnesota doesn't have term limits, so he had been in forever. And then he was a state representative, and then he ran for state treasurer on the platform of eliminating the office. And I said, that's a guy I can vote for.
Oh, heck yeah.
Absolutely. And it took him, I think, 2 terms to completely enact. Initially started off right from the get-go, working toward eliminating the office in a responsible manner. There are things that the treasurer of the state does that are important to do, and so he needed to build the infrastructure to make that happen as just a cabinet position of the governor's office.
Mm-hmm.
But there's honestly in the state of Missouri, for instance, what you have is you've got investment policy decisions are not made entirely by the treasurer, but there's a lot of advice that comes from the treasurer in investment policy. Much of that policy there's very little latitude on. The state legislature has written rules as to what the state can invest its money in and where it can invest it, so there just aren't that many options. But in terms of they then start putting together programs. For instance, can't think of who was Clint Zweifel was treasurer up until probably 3-4 years ago. Zweifel, a Democrat, had pushed for a small business and farming loan program that was made with state funds rather than putting them into other investments. And his contention was that this was a good program. It was good for Missourians, of course. The always hear good for Missouri, and good for the money.
Because you never present something that was bad.
Why would you? Exactly. But at the
this
end
is
of it,
awful for our people.
Oh, exactly. But I mean, a great example of it was there was a sheet metal operation either in Northeast, I think actually on the Blue River Bottoms, so call it kind of adjacent to Northeast there.
Yeah.
And I've never met the man who runs the operation, probably a fine man, probably a great businessman, but had applied for and obtained a $500,000 loan to buy a piece of fabricating equipment that his competitors didn't have, which put him at an advantage to his competitors. But let's ask, who paid for that machine? At the end of the day, whose tax dollars paid for that machine?
Oh, exactly.
Certainly he did, but his competitors paid too.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't seem appropriate that government is out there picking winners and losers.
Yeah, well, and potentially not only did his competitors pay for it, but his competitors' clients. And
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that is at its core, because one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, because I've been conflicted in the last year, not because my stances have changed on anything, but mainly because you start working things out in your mind, and you need friends, you need family, and you need outside sources. You need third parties to bounce ideas off of. And like, I basically decided that my goal was going to be, I'm going to, for the next few years, I'm going to read every biography of people that I like, that I don't think I like, that I very much dislike. And I'm going to try to figure out what it is, one, that made them who they were, one, what made them great, and what made them awful, or at least not as good as you think. And Hamilton the musical is huge right now. So one of my first actually, I think it was my first biography in the last year and a half was Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton. Of course, once you read Ron Chernow, I just fell in love with how his writing style was. But I'm reading about him, and it was a very interesting thing because it's so much like you just figure out that historically you fight the same arguments every day, every hour, every minute. And his fight, once he became Secretary of the Treasury, was very much a fight that we're having today. Now, he was an incredibly intelligent individual. The people around him were incredibly intelligent, not infallible, but smart. And his ideal to have a funded debt is what really drove he and Jefferson apart. And at the same time, he also said, and Jefferson never talked about this, but even in his letters and everything that he wrote, it's like, I want to have it to establish our credit and then pay it off. And so people look at Alexander Hamilton and they say, he likes debt, and here's why it's a good thing. People look at Thomas Jefferson and say, no, states' rights and everything else. But if you look at it, it's really a combination of those two things. Like it is the perfect definition of what America is. It's like you're looking at a situation where two men, hyper-intelligent people, both wanted to do everything they possibly could to help the nation and disagreed completely on how to do it. But both of them realized that there were issues like points and counterpoints to their arguments. Where we've gotten today, like the Libertarian Party would seem just the norm. Might even seem a little more, I don't want to say socialist, but it might even seem a little bit more government friendly at the time than it did to them because they were dealing with the beginnings. So it's interesting to me to see you go from absolutely no issue with Thomas Jefferson, no debt, states' rights, that's it, to Alexander Hamilton saying, no, states' rights are good, but we also have to have a strong federal government. And they knew that from the Articles of Confederation. So with somebody who represents the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian Party of the state of Missouri, somebody who's run for office and that kind of thing, when you look at the historical arguments and what we're doing today, it's got to be one of the most frustrating things. Because we have a party on the right with Republicans who campaign on being fiscally conservative, and when you pass a $1 trillion deficit, you can no longer ever make that claim again.
That's correct.
And Democrats, 4 out of 8 years with President Obama's administration, did the exact same thing.
Right, but they're giving the people what they want.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're giving the people exactly what the people want. The Republicans want money spent just like the Democrats want money spent. The difference is how the Republicans consider paying for it, and that's changing as well. Mm-hmm. The Republicans, and I should say this. I mean, the Democrats wanting to pay for things with taxes, they don't want taxes for everybody. It's at the end of the day, they want a far more progressive tax situation than we have today, and they have their people who will stand up and say, "Oh well, this is right." We have Warren Buffett and who am I thinking of? Hedge fund manager Ray Dalio.
Oh,
who it just came out in the last couple of days that Ray made more money with his hedge fund than anyone else in the United States this past year. And it's really easy to talk about income inequality when you are at the absolute top of the game as far as income goes. And Warren Buffett, on the other hand, is a different story. Warren Buffett has had a tax avoidance strategy since he learned that from his father, who was an old right Republican and a very definite anti-taxer. And Warren learned from the old man, look, don't pay the taxes. Yeah. And Warren can say, look, my secretary pays more than taxes than I do, but that's because Warren built a business that doesn't pay tax. That's what it's designed to do. But yes, I mean, getting back to your original point, yeah, you look at Jefferson, you look at Hamilton, both bright men without a doubt, and far more in the libertarian camp than anyone is on the national scene today with any real power or voice in the United States at this point. But what intrigues me about Hamilton, and I've not seen the musical Hamilton, but the left is all in love with this man who did all these wonderful things. At the end of the day, we're talking about a man who was dragged kicking and screaming out of mercantilism.
Mm-hmm.
He at the tail end of the 18th century, the mercantile efforts of many of the founders of the United States. That's what they were used to. They were used to a monarchy and a mercantile structure. I mean, we have a mercantile president. We have a president who is trying to recreate the 18th century all over again
Mm-hmm.
as a mercantilist. It's very interesting that the left is so vehemently against Trump's policies, not just the man. I mean, I think Donald Trump could do an awful lot of good for himself by standing up, having a fireside chat, and just saying, "Look, I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
Most people don't like me. My kids don't even like me.
Mm-hmm.
But look, this is what I plan to do, and this is why I plan to do it." Instead, he tries to make it like people like him, and everyone's infuriated by it. Look, get over the fact you don't. I think he has an inferiority complex. You don't need to be liked to make things happen, and no one likes him, and no one ever has liked him. So it's let's move on from there and get things done. But I think it's just interesting to look at, if you go to core policies. The core policies of Alexander Hamilton and the beliefs and the core policies and beliefs of Donald Trump are far more similar than Hamilton and Jefferson or Trump and Jefferson by any means.
Yeah. Well, the entire reason that he was able to create what he created was because he looked around and went, states haven't set real tariffs yet. They haven't established that yet. That's our funding mechanism. Not the problem, I guess, in my opinion, a problem, but the argument for exactly what you said was Trump has established tariffs for a different reason, I would say.
Yes.
But when you're a libertarian looking at it, the other issue is like, yeah, you're doing that, but at the same time, buddy, you also have an income tax. You have sales tax, you have property tax, you have every tax that people are paying. And now on top of that, you're also establishing a tariff, which is another tax.
Sure. Well, mercantilism also is protectionism as well.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's not just the tariffs. It's the protectionist attitude that goes along with it as well.
Yeah.
It's the concept of the general derogatory look at other nations, saying, "Look, you just supply us the raw materials. We'll build these things, and then we'll sell them back to you."
Yeah. Works out really well for third world countries in that situation too. Yeah.
I travel back and forth to India for work, and there's not a lot of knowledge of American politicians in India. They're just not that associated with what goes on in the United States.
Yeah.
But they do understand that during the Trump administration, and actually during the latter years of the Obama administration, H-1B visas, H-1Bs and any other travel visas have become much more difficult to obtain.
Yeah.
And here we sit in a country that has, let's look at the city in particular, the city of Kansas City. Anyone who is in the computer programming business that hires developers will tell you that we're about 2,500 developers short of needs in Kansas City, of senior developer level people with 6, 7, 8 years experience minimum that can operate as a team lead or a senior developer. There are plenty of junior level developers coming up. There were all the coding camps, a lot of people coming out of school with degrees in computer science that are not going to be useful to the degree that a senior developer is for a period of time. There's a period of time of learning that just goes on, and it's acclimation, and think of it almost as an apprenticeship. Well, there's a school not far from here in Lee's Summit, the Twin City, or the local Kansas City campus of University of Central Missouri. They have a master's degree program in computer science, and in the fall of 2011, I was having a conversation with one of the staff members there who told me that they had, I believe, 2,500 Indian nationals going through the program. And, it happens, we happen to need 2,500 developers. They've got 2,500 in the program at any given time. And, of course, all those people aren't going to stay in Kansas City, but they're certainly going to try. Well, when the economic policies of the Trump administration altered to make obtaining H-1Bs more difficult, a lot of those people picked up and looked at it and said, I'm getting a master's degree from an unknown middle-level state college in the middle of the United States. This is not going to put me at Google. It's not going to put me at Apple.
Right.
I don't need to stay. I was here to get a job in Kansas City.
Yeah.
I don't know what the program is today, but I know it's under 1,000 students. And the problem is that a lot of these people would have turned out to be good developers for the Cerners of the world, the Sprints, and every other company that needs developers. And we just continue to battle that. And the Indian subcontinent certainly has a lot of software development there. But read an article while I was there. 80% of the people graduating college in India with a technical degree, an engineering type degree in computer science, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, what have you, 80% of their graduates are not qualified to work in that field at graduation. They've got the same difficulties with their educational program that we do, where there are a lot of programs popping up that just don't really fit the need.
Right.
And what do you do?
Well, the H-1B issue has been just something that I feel like anybody who looks at it for 5 minutes or more bangs their head against a wall. Because this is what we used to love to do.
Right.
Like, in my mind, they should be given out like candy. Like if you, and maybe I'm wrong in some aspects where you should look at it a little bit further, but at the same time, if you have somebody that has the skills to make an American company better, bring them over.
Well, not just that. Let's try to look through and try to find me a top-rated technology company in the United States that doesn't have a foreigner or first-generation American on board at the top or within that top circle. Google, Apple. I guess we could say Microsoft, but very, very few. I mean, there's anyone who's got the ambition to get on the figurative boat and come to the United States already has a lot more gumption than the average kid in the United States. And they're out there trying to make a better life for themselves, whether they're in computer software or some other form of engineering, or whether they just want to roof my house.
Yeah.
I can't find anybody else to roof my house.
Yeah. No, I grew up with that. I told you that my dad was a floor installer growing up. So we in the boom, we saw a lot of new construction, and I heard from a lot of roofers, especially. I can't believe it's the old comment of I can't believe they're coming up here and they're stealing my job. They're doing this. They're doing that, and it frustrated the hell out of me, and I know it really frustrated the hell out of my brother because the word Mexican was thrown around like a cuss. Like, these Mexicans are coming up and they're doing this. My brother is literally half Mexican, and they're sitting here. He's my half brother. I never refer to him as that until I'm trying to qualify a statement because we're very close, but his mom, full-blooded Mexican, and great heritage, amazing family, and they'd say this to my brother, who looks white. He looks like anybody else walking down the street.
Right.
And it's like, you insensitive prick, number one. And number two, it's like, I've watched them put roofs on 5 houses today.
Right.
How you doing?
Well, the other side of it is the reason that we haven't got more Americans willing to roof houses is because they can do other things.
Yeah.
I mean, the Mexican laborers coming up and walking on roofs, falling off roofs, have put a lot of guys in a lot of safer positions where they ultimately end up making more money. I mean, I realize some guys that are just not going to do anything but roof houses as far as their construction abilities go. It's laying out shingles, and that's about where it ends.
Yep.
I get it. But there are a lot of guys that are now involved in framing or moved on to finish carpentry that started out on a roof somewhere.
Yeah.
And when they realized, hey, these guys are coming in and they're starting to work pretty cheap, I better figure out something else. And the other side of it is, do I want to, if I live in the central or southern United States, do I want to get that much sunburn every year?
Yeah.
Getting pounded up there. And I mean, how many guys fall off a roof every year? It's if you can prevent yourself from doing it and move on and do something else, it's an uptick in life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say every, but almost every comedian has some bit, about, are you going to pick your own fruit? Because they're always talking about, the fact that it used to come up, the Mexicans would come up, they'd work in California for that season, and then they'd go back. And my wife, and I wish to God I had it written down because it was an amazing study. But one thing that really just kind of solidified my views on immigration was she sent me this link, and it was not an internet link where it's like, BuzzFeed said that this is happening. It was, a peer-reviewed article where they basically talked about every single time the United States of America invests a large sum of money in border security, illegal immigration gets worse. Mm-hmm. Because border security sounds good. We're securing our border, making sure the terrorists who have never come from Mexico don't come back or don't come in.
Right.
And it's always like the one a year or two ago, I can't remember exactly when it was, but the girl that was killed by an illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
It's like, that's awful. That's horrible. That's one of 19 million.
Right.
And I feel horrible for her family, and her family I give a 100% pass to. You can hate as much as you want because I can't even imagine.
No doubt.
But every one of us has to look at themselves in the mirror and say, what do you see on the news every single night in Kansas City? Mm-hmm. A murder, a rape, something terrible happening. Those are citizens killing each other every day.
Right.
It's like, but it was interesting to me, the economics behind it. If we're going to put $25 billion into building a wall, because that's always the thing, the wall. If we're going to put that much money into it, can we please conduct a study, a real study this time, not a I'm the president for 4 years and I've got to shove this down everybody's throat, because most presidents do that, but a good study that can really show that this doesn't work, and they already have it, but it's not politically positive for anybody.
Right, and so it's not going to get used. It's only going to get used if somebody can use it to get ahead.
Exactly.
Well, it's true. I mean, if you look at the amount of you would expect, because El Paso, Texas is, I mean, virtually an entirely Mexican town, you would think that El Paso, right on the border, would be all sorts of trouble.
Yeah.
El Paso has a far lower crime rate than Kansas City or and take it to a size of, I don't know how many people live in El Paso, so I don't know if I'm talking about 100,000 or 200,000 or what it is, but let's look at cities within their size range, their population range, and I'll tell you, I'm sure El Paso is going to come out looking better than most of them. Mm-hmm. Consistently has been.
Yeah. Because why is it a big issue? In my opinion is, and not that I'm a big fan of taxes in general and how they're collected, but that was always my issue when I was going through my finance program. It was like, okay, so I remember it just clicking in one of my classes, probably because I had a professor that was very progressive on the subject, but when you think about taxes, it's like, well, who's paying? The company, the individual owner, the self-employed person is paying a contractor, whatever it might be. It's like, they're not paying the taxes on this side, but they're responsible for reporting. So normally, there's a citizen behind the company, and they're paying somebody that they know is probably illegal. We can look past that. We cannot. But this is a problem that a lot of people don't have an issue with until it directly affects them in a negative way, just like everything else. Mm-hmm. And there's no answer to it. Because the answer to, for most people is, let's invest a lot of money and try to secure ourselves as much as possible. But it never works.
Right.
So,
well, if you look at historically, when have we had difficulties with immigration in this country? And I shouldn't say difficulties with immigration. I should say difficulties with people accepting immigrants.
Right.
We've had these problems primarily when we've been in periods of turmoil in the United States. Mm-hmm. And this is a period of turmoil. I mean, it's from probably late 1980s to the present. It's been a very difficult time. I mean, there's the technological change and how it affects the job market's been a big thing. Mm-hmm. And it's going to continue to be a big thing for a long time. But historically, through the centuries, when in periods of great unknown, people have lashed out against people who don't look like them.
Yeah.
And that's just standard fare.
Well, yeah, like California in the 1840s and 50s.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. So, because you're the Libertarian representative on the show, what one thing that you see in those situations with labor and with everything else is the at least prescribed libertarian mindset is let it get figured out. In almost every situation is let the market figure it out, let the people figure it out. It will eventually get figured out, no matter what the problem is, financial, immigration, whatever. Two problems then occur. Either the government oversteps or it doesn't do enough. And libertarians, I think, at least if you see the message boards that I've seen, the comment sections that I've seen, and this is where I want to kind of progress the conversation into infighting a bit, is I don't think there is a question in most people's mind that at some point on certain issues, not all, but in certain issues, government has to step in. We're not the same country today if Abraham Lincoln doesn't say slavery's done. We're not the same country today if there's not an end to the Cold War. And that's a government issue that eventually got stopped. And we can go back and forth about the positives, negatives, before, during, and after. But when you look at the situations that are coming up today, where do you see the effective positive of the federal government and the horrifyingly negative? Because where I see the horrifyingly negative is our, I don't even want to call it a war effort, just the constant state of warfare that we're in. But in a positive way, I can see individuals saying there are poor in our country, there are sickly in our country, we have to take care of them. What's your answer to, I don't want to say what's the whole libertarian mindset on that, and please speak for the whole party, but just in the, I guess in the general concept of when does government need to step in as opposed to when does it just need to get the hell away? Because I feel like it gets in the way too many times. But there have to be times where it's defined as, yeah, probably makes sense right now.
Well, the government is the adjudicator of justice. It's the final call on what is fair and what is not.
That's a really good statement.
Like
I'm just going to clip that.
Okay. Unfortunately, I think that we have people who pander to one side or the other who decide what that fairness is all about. Mm-hmm. Is that fairness about providing everyone an education? And now, of course, the Democrats in the presidential field are talking about how do we make that education, how do we provide education up through 4 years of college?
Yeah.
I think I'll go back and say how many people have said this, but the government that governs best governs least. Mm-hmm. I think you need a baseline set of rules, and you need, and I'm not convinced that it takes governmental people to enforce those mm-hmm. rules and to adjudicate what is fair and not fair within those rules. But I think if you're going to use a governmental structure to have law enforcement and to have courts and to have that entire process, I think it needs to limit itself to the role of adjudicator. Let's just decide what is right and wrong based upon the circumstance as it arises. I don't want to get too far afield, but if you think about if you think about the minimum wage, for instance, we have, and this is typically the way that it works. The left starts out, now it's let's all be fair and pay people $15. Mm-hmm. The right is still against that, but at some point in time, the right will own that, just mm-hmm. as the right owns Obamacare now, and the right owns Social Security, and everything that they preached against, they own now. They got to have it because it's theirs.
Yep.
But when we look at things like government mandating a minimum wage, I think we have to look at all sides of this. Yes, there are people who are going to benefit. Absolutely, there are people who are going to benefit. That guy who's making, $13, $14 an hour, who's now going to make $15 an hour, he's going to benefit. Mm-hmm. But no one ever is willing to talk about the costs of such legislation and such fiat rules.
Yeah.
For instance, there are a lot of people that are getting paid current minimum wage, $7.25 or whatever it is in the state of Missouri, who, quite frankly, aren't worth the $7.25.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. In some cases, they're mentally handicapped and they're on some sort of a program, and they're really not contributing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not blanket saying that people who have mental handicaps are not contributors. I'm just saying there are those that are in that situation.
There's a subsidy in another way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's also, though, look at the high school student who's getting his first job and doesn't have a skill set yet, and unfortunately, due to what's occurred, I don't know if it's a family thing or an educational thing or whatever it is, has absolutely no clue how he should act in a job situation or anything. He doesn't know how to act around people that aren't his family or his friends. It's going to take time for those people to pick up and learn what they need to move on to a level where they can make more money.
Yep.
Ray Kroc, is in many ways reviled for starting the fast food revolution in this country. But what he did, for many years, Ray Kroc was he probably is today, the largest employer of kids in high school. First job. McDonald's is your first job. And, of course, now it's other franchises and not just McDonald's. But that concept of giving somebody a first job, letting them learn, knowing that they're not going to stay forever, and if they do choose to stay, eventually they'll work their way up into a management-type position.
Mm-hmm. Or if they don't, then they're not. Yeah. They're worth what they're worth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But very few people stay at a minimum wage for a long period of time.
100%.
I've got a guy, when I had my apartment buildings in Northeast, I had a guy that did work for me that I paid about $10 an hour to. And, for $10 an hour, I could employ him. But he wasn't a detail guy. I'd have him do some demolition in an apartment building, and he'd miss corners and things. And I'd have to go back and clean all that stuff up. At the end of the day, he was worth $10 an hour to me to get the really heavy stuff out of the way, and then I'd come in and do the cleanup work. But could I pay him $15 an hour? Probably not. I'd have to think real seriously about it. I'd find somebody else who was worth $15 an hour. Yeah.
If you're going to pay it, yeah.
Exactly. And so in a case like that, we take a guy who works hard for $10 an hour and it doesn't look very fair because he's busting his butt out there to make $10 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But frankly, that's what he's worth. I can't find a reason to not find somebody better.
Yeah. It's such an interesting argument to me on minimum wage because I completely agree with you on the subject matter. I think the issue that I get into on my side is I don't. And again, I'm 100% on your side. I'm trying to figure out how to verbally express what my issue is with it. Is I don't think there are enough people who, and again, this goes back to, another libertarian argument, which is we have a mandated education system that doesn't teach things that it needs to teach.
Correct.
And my favorite one is always April 15th is coming up. Thank God it's Pythagorean. What is it? The
Pythagorean theorem?
Yes. For whatever reason, I can't say it. Pythagorean theorem. Thank God it's that season because I needed to do that today. It's like as opposed to taxes.
Yes.
And that's always been my issue is if you really get into it and you don't understand tax law, you don't understand how these things work, you don't understand cost of goods sold, you don't understand why those are deducted from a business's tax return, then you can't understand why certain businesses don't pay taxes. Mm-hmm. It's like they have wages, they have payroll taxes, they have cost of goods sold, they have all of these things, and if all of those at the end of the day add up to what their taxes should have been, they don't pay any. It's not that they didn't spend money. It's not that they didn't buy something from your organization or your friend's organization or your brother's organization. It's that at the end of the day, that's our tax system. And if you hate it, write your congressman.
Right.
But when it comes to the education system, that's where I notice it the most is I can go up to somebody, and I do this as much as I possibly can every time I get into this argument with somebody, and it's not often. I try to make it sound like it's every day, but it's not. It's every once in a while I'll get into an argument with somebody who is just vehemently $15 an hour. That's the minimum wage. Okay. Let's say right now, before we pass that, I have 3 people that I employ at $10 an hour. You just caused 33.333% unemployment because you decided that a $15 minimum wage was good.
Well, just pay them 15 instead of 10.
Yeah.
That's the argument.
Yeah. Well, again, mine is just if you're really looking at it, it's if I know based on my books, based on everything that I have, my budget says I have $30 to spend per hour on labor.
But the budget means nothing.
Yeah.
You can pay the money. That's you're I don't want to get into all the negativity of it, but you're a white male. You can pay the money.
Yeah.
It's the way it is.
It's the best argument.
Yeah. And yeah, it's The other area, similar to minimum wage, that is an amazingly...
And sorry, just before you keep going, that's my favorite thing about math is it doesn't matter.
That's right. At the end of the day, it doesn't.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's all optional.
Yeah. Okay. So, go ahead.
but the other part of the whole labor picture that the federal government could step in and help with, there are some regulations at the federal level with regard to employment. I mean, the Labor Department is certainly large. There are certainly things they do. But what the federal government could do is they could step on the state governments that have created the various licensing boards that have gotten out of control. Just as we've had education inflation, where it now takes a college degree to get a job doing virtually anything that took, an 8th grade education for our grandparents.
Yep.
The same can be said of licensure and certification. In the 1950s, and this is from memory, I think I might be off on maybe by a point or two, but not much. In the 1950s, the labor force in the state of Missouri, which was pretty typical for the United States, was 15% licensed or certified to do their job in the 1950s. Today, 85% is. And if you look at where people are making money, if you look at where innovation is coming from, if you look at any of these things, they're not in licensed trades.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, surely lawyers and doctors are making money,
Yeah.
but that's part of that is the lawyers don't seem to understand how to control their numbers. We've got too many of them, and they know it. They're now working at Starbucks. But the American Medical Association has for years limited the number of doctors that are allowed to, or students that are allowed to go to med school.
Yeah.
And they limit, states limit the number of in the state of Missouri, you have to have a certificate of need in order to build a hospital. So, for instance, and you know who sits on the board?
Because heaven forbid.
You know who sits on the board?
Oh.
Oh, it's HCA and all these wonderful other companies that make a decision as to who needs, whether a community needs a hospital. But getting back specifically to credentialing, I mean, just the old one that Institute for Justice has fought against, things like hair braiding. When I had my buildings in Old Northeast, I had a lady who did African hair braiding in my building, and she hid it for the first 6 months. That she was there when I bought the building, and she hid it. And then one day I happened to see some things in the apartment. It was clear that she had a lady there, and she was doing some work. And I said, "That's kind of cool. What are you doing?" And she was like terrified. And a couple days later, I saw her in the hall, and she said, "Mr. O'Toole, I don't want you to think that I'm running a business here." And I said, "Well, if you weren't running a business, you probably wouldn't be able to pay your rent."
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, I'm the happiest person in the room that you're running a business.
That's right. I said, "Are you doing hair braiding?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, have at it. If you want to bring a friend in to double up your numbers, that's cool. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Yeah. And she was extremely relieved, and she became a good friend. I mean, she saw me as somebody who understood that here was a woman without an education who had a skill, and she could make a living doing this and pay her rent and buy food and take care of her kids.
Oh my God! So you mean without government intervention, she was good to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So how does the federal government help? Well, the federal government the Department of Labor could look at a lot of job qualifications and just say at the federal level, look, we don't think these are things that the states should be enforcing regulations on. I get it. I'm all for states having a fair bit of autonomy. We have 51 including DC, but
yeah.
Laboratories of economic laboratories to see what works and what doesn't work.
Well, they're a state. They just don't have any voting rights.
Yeah, well. No, they have voting rights, just no state.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. Yeah, but regardless, I think that that's an area that the federal government could step in and help out with. When you ask me, what roles the government can play in making society better, making people's lives better, and that sort of thing, I think the heavy hand of government making less government at the local and state level is a shot. I don't think that there are a lot of people who would agree with me on that. I think that most people would say, well, most conservatives and libertarians would say, well, let the states do their own thing, and keep the federal government out of it. Yeah, in general, I'm all for that, but the states have done a pretty poor job of making of protecting one set of workers from a potential other set of workers who might come in and compete with them.
Yeah.
I take the Austrian economic view that everything should be based on the consumer. If we look at the consumer, and for some great reference on this, go back. There are a series of videos from the late 1990s that Jeff Bezos made or was featured in, where he talks about his business. And I remember one in particular where they keep saying, well, you're an internet company. And he's like, I'm not really I use the internet. That's great. But what I'm a customer service company. I sell things to people. Yeah, but you're an internet company.
That makes a lot of sense.
And he's like, no. He said, and they would say such things as, well, what would you say to your customers who think that they're buying an internet company? He says, well, I think they should think of me as a customer service company, and they should want me to serve customers better than other people do, because it'll make me grow, regardless of the medium that I use, be it the telephone, be it the newspaper, be it the internet, who cares?
Yep.
At the end of the day, if you bring things to consumers at a reasonable price, if you treat consumers well, they'll make you money.
What a concept.
What an odd concept.
Yeah.
Exactly. I hear the argument all the time from when I use that philosophy and put that out there. I see the argument all the time. People say to me, well, you know what Henry Ford said? He had to pay his employees enough so that they could buy one of those cars. Well, it's an interesting circular reference, but if we start by paying people what it takes to buy the car, we won't make any cars.
Yeah.
The cars will have to go up in price to a point.
Right.
Everyone grows and gets to a level. I mean, I don't know, if you take inflation out of the mix, strip your numbers back to when you graduated college, are you making more today than you made when you graduated college?
Me?
Yeah. If you take inflation out of the mix, are you doing better than your first job out of college?
I'm a weird person because I am, but I'm in sales, so at this point I'm good. But I could definitely see somebody absolutely saying, like, absolutely not, because...
But that's hugely rare. Honestly, most people, if they look at their first job out of college, I'm not in sales, and I no longer trade full-time. I manage a staff of computer software developers in India, and if I look at my numbers relative to where I was when I graduated college.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
It's radically higher, but it's higher because I'm paid for what I know.
Yeah.
And we all know more things as we go along, whether that's something manual in labor. If I'm a guy who shines shoes for a living, and if I start shining shoes at 16 years old,
I'm going to be paid more by the time I'm 40 because I
I'm going to be a way better shoe shiner.
Yeah, do it better, faster. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I was confused because, like I said, I'm in sales, so my career's been up, down, left, right.
I get that. Absolutely.
But yeah, no, 100%. But the licensure thing is interesting to me because everything I've ever done since college has been licensed. I was a financial advisor coming out, so I had to pass Series 7 and 66, which actually, that might be one of the ones that I'm like, I'm okay with that, only because, boy, do you have to... People take advantage of those who don't know quite a bit, and I think they get found out very quickly, which would be an anti-government argument on that. But what I knew coming out of college was a lot of numbers. What I came into was sales.
Sure.
So it's an interesting concept on that.
I'll agree with you. My first non-licensed job was in 2007. Yet I was still in the same business. I started out with a Series 7 and a Series 63. I was a stock trader and an options trader, and did some time on the security sales side from 1985 through like 88 or so, and then went to the floor and traded commodities for many years, first futures, and then options. And then in 2007, I went to a totally unregulated side of the business. I traded over-the-counter options and financial derivatives, and ran a business for a small investment bank along those lines. And exactly the same thing, just in what at the time was a totally unregulated segment of the market by comparison. The salespeople and the traders did not have to be licensed. I maintained licenses just because I already had them.
Mm-hmm.
But after leaving, I went back and went to the Chicago Board of Trade after that in 2011, and spent I guess 3 years on the floor of the Board of Trade in Chicago, and had to re-up, had to go to the National Futures Association and get re-fingerprinted and everything, because I had been 5 years or something out of licensure. I was licensed, but the way that commodity licenses work, you don't have to park them like you do in the securities industry and have somebody hold them. As long as it's still out there, it's effectively on hold until you come back. It's a different deal, and it's just a different regulatory body. But it was really simple to come back. I didn't have to go take a Series 3 again or anything like that.
They're just such fun exams. I mean, I only took 2. I took the 66 and the 7, and after the 7, I was done.
Yeah.
I'd say that, and I took the real estate exams.
Well, there you go. I've been an inveterate test taker. I've done securities exams, including a registered options principal. Then I did.
Oh man!
Then I did the futures exams, and then the CBOT, the Chicago Board of Trade's own exams.
That's a cool place.
Yeah, it used to be a cool place. I left because it isn't a cool place anymore. There's nothing there.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, it is, and it's as one who still trades from the outside, it's really nice to know where my price fills are right now. But at the same time, I'll be the first to admit to you, I've never been a good position trader, and that's why I don't trade full time anymore. I mess around, but I don't trade full time. I used to make a fair bit of money making markets, and I'd buy the bids and sell the offers, and manage the risk in between. And you get this big giant options book that's built of multiple months, multiple strikes, puts and calls, and futures to balance it off and everything. But the real money that's made is the difference between the bid and the offer.
Yeah.
But you're trading in enough volume to make that work. And I've just never been a great enough position trader to turn that around and be a full-time trader off the floor. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
But and then testing-wise, I have a private pilot license. I have my instrument rating.
Okay, we have to talk about the private pilot license. Off this, but we have to talk about it because that's one of my goals in life.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a good goal. I'll tell you one thing. Becoming a pilot made me, I think, better at just about everything I did. Becoming an instrument pilot definitely made me better at everything I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. There's no organization like flying single pilot IFR in a storm. You learn how to really get things done.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing like thinking, well, if I fuck this up.
There is no time.
Yeah.
There's no next hour. Yeah. You get a couple of shots, and that's really it.
Yeah.
Done.
Whew. Okay. Yeah, we have to talk about that off air. So let's talk about infighting, because this is a problem, I think, for every party, but I think the Libertarian Party does suffer from it the most. Democrats have a lot of infighting, but when they get their candidate, they back them. I don't think they're as strong as the Republican Party, who is like, that's my candidate, and when, Ted Cruz is insulted by Trump 10,000 times, and then all of a sudden he's his best friend, Republicans, I think, are the best at it, or not the best at it. But libertarians, every message board you get on, every single website, every Facebook page, every Instagram feed, anything that you can follow a libertarian on, they're either too libertarian or not enough. And normally it's the latter. It's always not enough. And just being
real libertarian. You gotta be a real libertarian.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing that drives me absolutely nuts. It's like when I came into the party, I saw the sheet, the thing that everybody looks at, just here's what we believe. And I just went, yes. No question, no thought, like absolutely. There might be slight deviations from the mean on that, but for the most part, less government, better economics, I'm all for it. Mm-hmm. But if you would mention on a libertarian message board, Facebook comment, whatever, when you want to get really into the weeds, if you just make a comment like, I don't think we can really stop Social Security within 5 years. the amount of hate you will see is incredible. And you don't like, unless you say, like, unless you're on a Republican side and you say Hillary's the best, then you're going to get attacked. If you're on basically anything on the internet right now and you say Trump is okay, like, not just great, not make America great again, not anything else, like, he's done some good things, you're going to get attacked. But on a libertarian site, you will get fried for saying anything positive about government. And then everybody jumps on board saying, well, you're just not libertarian enough. And I can't remember exactly which one is which, but Penn and Teller, the comedy routine, one is a heavy libertarian. Penn Jillette, thank you. And he did an interview with Bill Maher. And I love Bill Maher. I disagree with him on almost everything, but I love the fact that he calls out everybody. But he did a great just exchange with him, because he was like, well, you guys believe in privatized roads, and you believe that everybody should do this and everybody should do that, and you're wrong here and you're wrong here and you're wrong there. It's like, correct. I disagree with you on what you said. However, that's not the important thing right now. The important thing right now is that healthcare is messed up. We are spending money on warfare that 14 other countries combined are not. Not 14 other countries like Morocco, like Russia, South Korea, Israel, China, all the big ones. They're not spending as much money as we are by 14 times. We have programs that we have mathematical models that don't make sense, that can't make sense. Those are the libertarian issues. You could put it on a 5-point PowerPoint, say, this is what we have to fix. Mm-hmm. And if you did that, you'd still be called not libertarian enough.
Of course.
How do you fix that? And do it in 5 minutes, because it's the most impossible question to answer.
Well, it's hard, and I don't know that it is fixable, and I'll tell you why. A lot of the tenets of libertarianism do not align themselves with
politics.
With politics and government.
Yeah,
exactly. And if you look at where the Libertarian Party started, the Libertarian Party came from the right, which is in some ways unfortunate, because there are just as many. Sissy and I, when we were married, probably converted more Democrats to libertarianism than Republicans.
Really?
Yeah, we were inner city people. We always lived inside the city, and so those are our points of contact. But I think the problem that has existed for a long, long time is that the left treats libertarianism as an extension of the right. And the libertarians, for the most part, are unwilling to step up and say, no, that's not us. They just kind of just shake it off. What we have, as far as disagreement between our members, we have the pragmatists. We have the pragmatists that want to get elected and solve problems in a libertarian fashion. And I think that's a good thing, but if we're going to be pragmatists, I think we ought to be doing it in the roles of dog catchers, water commissioners, school board members, eventually city councilmen, mayors, state reps, state senators, treasurers, auditors, governors, etc., and work our way up. We present ourselves to the nation as a presidential candidate, and then a lot of ragtag people on the way down, some of which do a great job putting together a campaign. Brad Eichstead locally put together a phenomenal campaign.
He was amazing.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
And he did very well on the stump. He was well liked by the crowds, and he got almost no votes.
Yep.
And that happens. When there's a three-way race, people look at it and just say, nope, not going to happen.
My guy has to win, not the other guy, even though I disagree, or even though I agree with this guy more.
That's right.
Yep.
Now compare that. In 2010, I ran a state rep campaign against. There was no incumbent. At the time, it was called. I think we were District 19. They did a lot of reworking. Inner city, Old Northeast. The winner of the race was John Rizzo. The primary was ugly. It was Rizzo won by one vote. And
That's too close.
it really is close. And it went to court, and the judge said, "I don't really see a reason why there should be a recount here. We've got a winner. We've got a single vote here. I mean, we got
Yeah.
a winner." And that guy shortly thereafter left the bench and went to work as the county attorney advisor to the county board. And who got him the job was the father of the winner.
Oh, Jesus.
And then to top it off,
It's like, even if that wasn't political, that just shows you exactly
Yeah.
the situation.
well,
Yeah.
and then Johnny's uncle and aunt voted in the election, and I'm going to guess they voted for John, but they live north of the river. And so Johnny's uncle pled guilty in federal court, and I did a year or something like that behind bars. The plea agreement was that his wife would stay out of jail,
Mhm.
and he did a year. But so there were two votes right there.
Yeah.
That would have turned that primary. But we're getting in the weeds. When John and I were in the general election in 2010, I got, I don't know, 22% of the vote, something like that,
Oh, wow.
with 1 weekend's worth of campaigning. But there was no Republican in the race. Brad Eichstätt went out and spent real money, real time,
Mm-hmm.
busted his butt,
Yeah.
and got like a 5% share.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of how it works.
Yeah.
It's sad. When I ran for state auditor in 2014, I think it was 14. Yes. In 2014, ran for state auditor. There was no Democrat. The Democrats could not dredge up a candidate from the bottom of the river to put in a statewide race. Never seen it happen before.
That was auditor, you said?
Auditor. And Tom Schweik was the sitting Republican auditor, and so it was Schweik, me, and a Constitution Party guy. The Greens didn't yet have ballot access in Missouri. I won Kansas City proper. I did not win the suburbs of Kansas City, but
Mhm.
the Kansas City Election Board core of Kansas City. I won Kansas City, and I almost won St. Louis County, St. Louis City.
Wow.
Yeah. So it tells you people will step up and vote for somebody that's not one of the above when there's only one of the
Yeah.
when there's only one opponent. People will say anybody but that guy. I'll
Yep.
vote for that guy. I may not agree with him, but I'll vote for him
Mhm.
because he's not that guy.
Yeah.
So they'll do it. But will they vote for libertarians on principle? We don't know, because every election is always, well, this time we've got to support such and such because otherwise it's going to be, we got to support Trump because it's going to be Hillary.
Yep.
This time we've got to vote for
Well, and this was the big test, too, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but this was also a huge test because there were a lot of never-Trumpers on the Republican side.
yes, there were.
And
And they talked a great game until it came time to vote.
exactly. And then it was like, oh, we could have Hillary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
We got. I can't remember who it was. It might have been Bill Maher, too. Might be referencing him too much, but it was like you could either vote for. Oh, no, I think it was. I can't remember now, but it was like you could either vote for a Republican or Donald Trump. And I thought it was a great comment.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Yeah, it's Hillary was like, I think Hillary was the first Democrat to ever come out of her family. I mean, her brother Hugh Rodham was like treasurer of the Cook County, Illinois Republican Party, and everything
Oh, yeah.
else. Yeah, I mean, solid Republican credentials. She just happened to go to where did she go to school? She went to Wesley,
Yeah.
and got all liberalized.
Yep.
But,
Yeah, I looked at that race and was like, I literally multiple times during it because I just watched it and just kind of laughed. It was like, we'll see how the U.S. ends. It won't, but that was kind of how I was looking at it at the time. And just like, well, I'm glad I'm a libertarian because my choice is easy because your only issue is Aleppo.
that's right.
That's your only comment. So you're voting for. I remember, again, Bill Maher. I'm referencing him way too much on this, but it's like he made fun of Ken Bone, who got famous in the second debate.
Right.
And it's like, you're voting for the Aleppo guy? Like, that's it. That's all you've got. Like a couple of weird interviews and Aleppo, and that's all you have.
That's right. And honestly, I mean, why should a presidential candidate know about Aleppo? why are we in Aleppo?
Exactly.
What's going on in Aleppo that is so important to the United States? Why did we get ourselves into Aleppo?
Yeah, if it was Aleppo, Alabama, and something was happening there, yeah, he should know about that.
Yeah, I get it. But, Syria is a nice place to visit, but we don't live there.
No. So I was telling you about the podcast I did with my buddy Corey Gallagher. Like, somebody that I just absolutely just go to him with questions. Like, okay, so I know we're supposed to come out and we're supposed to have dinner and like have drinks and we're all supposed to enjoy each other's company. But I have questions about what's going on right now because the historical issues that are going about, like that have to do with this. And I remember talking to him and I was like, I saw a meme the other day, and history is not memes, truth is not memes, of course. But it's like President Obama was the only president to be in office and for all 8 years, outside of FDR because he was in for 4 terms, or almost 4 terms. But he was at war for a 2-term president the whole time. 26,000 bombs, all that kind of stuff. And it was 8 countries. It's like, I should know about 3 minutes, or maximum. Syria, for whatever reason, but Iraq, Afghanistan. Why are there 5 more? Mm-hmm. And of course, he knew. He explained it to me, and we kind of went on our way. But it's one of those things like, why are we bombing Yemen? Why are we there? Right. FBI, CIA, intelligence have told us constantly, like, the reason that they attack is because we're in their country. Which is exactly how I would feel about Canada if they were bombing us all the time.
That's exactly right. What we need to remember is that if somebody starts dropping bombs on the United States tomorrow, the left is going to coalesce around Donald Trump because that's Americans do that. They will coalesce around whatever leader in wartime comes about. Yeah. And I'm not so cynical as to think I'm wrong here. I mean, I'm saying that wrong, but I am cynical enough to look at the whole thing and just say, I think a lot of this is support for the regime.
Yeah.
Why on earth, I don't know if you follow Indian politics. There are very few people that do, but the Pakistanis and the Indians are at it again.
They're really good friends.
Yeah.
No.
Well, they used to be the same group of people, but not anymore. But honestly, the Modi government, the sitting government in India, it's been in power for 5 years. They're going through their national elections right now, which is a 5-week process.
Thank God.
God, yes. Well, when you get 900 million people voting, it takes a while. Crazy, but Modi, it's very convenient that a guy who did not accomplish a lot of what he wanted to accomplish in power all of a sudden is at war with the Pakis. And believe me, the Indians are very nationalistic, and they're very much, we got to do what we got to do. Mm-hmm. And if Modi wins this election, I think it'll be because of the Pakistan situation. Jeez. Because in the 70-year history of India, at the end of the day, it's always been about the economics. Mm-hmm. If more people are employed, if more people are eating, if everything is good, they reelect their president. Well, it's a prime minister, but they'll reelect the party, and the prime minister will stay.
Well, that's every country.
Yeah, but in India, they've only got a 70-year history, so we can look at it. Yeah. We can look at it, and we can say exactly 20 times this has happened.
Yeah.
But here we are 19 times. Here we are coming up on number 20. Will it happen that way again? Will it follow economics, or is Modi, clever enough to take economics off the table and make certain that we're throwing bombs? So we'll see.
Yeah.
So back to our original point: libertarians and the conflicts between libertarians. Point 1: there's a large set of the Libertarian Party that just doesn't like politics in general, and isn't going to like anybody who isn't purely 100% libertarian. I almost said Republican.
You did.
Because the last few presidential candidates have lined up right there.
Yeah.
But I mean, I put myself on the anarchist side of the Libertarian Party. I'm not opposed to. I don't get into the battles.
Yeah.
But given a choice, I would see no government, or such a small government that it would just simply never get in the way.
Yeah.
But I'm not radical about it. I don't have time to get absolutely crazy about it and everything else. But I think there's a need for those of us who strip it all the way to the bottom and say, look, this is where libertarian purity is, and this should be the goal in the long term. This is where we are. This is where we want to be. If we lose that hardcore libertarian streak, the radical libertarian streak, the pragmatic libertarians will take us dramatically in the other direction.
Yeah.
And for us, dramatically in the other direction was Bob Barr. I mean, that was as dramatic as we can probably go and still call ourselves libertarians. But I mean, little things. At the 2012 National Convention, our delegation chair, to whom I was married at the time, in the state of Missouri, was a fan of Gary Johnson and wanted to see Gary get the nomination. And we had open delegation chairs. And the Johnson campaign was out looking for open chairs. And we accepted half a dozen, somewhere 4, 5, 6 people to come in and act as delegates in Missouri. At national conventions, you can fill your delegation with anyone from the floor. They don't have to be from your state.
Right.
And so we gave up. We gave open seats to Johnson delegates because we felt it was in the best interest to have Johnson be the guy.
Yep.
At that time, he was the best candidate we had. However, the next day, when it came to voting for party officers, Sissy stripped the delegates of their badges. And I was entirely in agreement. There are people who will probably never talk to Sissy again for that. There was one indicted Republican who was at the convention, Roger Stone, who was in the row in front of us, and Roger was working for the Johnson campaign, and he was in her face and yelling up one side and down the other, and she doesn't fluster easily, and she held up to him. But the point was, you bring in your friends to vote for a candidate, that's fine, but we're not going to vote policy. We're not going to put people in a position of power in our party and have people look at a slip of paper that they've been handed that tells them who to vote for. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
And that's where we drew the line. That's where Sissy drew the line. I think that's where the Missouri Party drew the line. I don't think we had any difficulty whatsoever from delegates that were our own people. Everyone looked at it and said, "So be it."
Yeah.
We do not want. And again, it was the candidate is a friend, but an extreme pragmatist.
Yep.
And ultimately, Jeff Neal, who had served in the past, ended up coming in as Jeff was not a candidate, but NODA kept winning. None of the above kept winning, and happened to see Jeff at dinner that night, and the election was carried over into the next day, and there were a lot of people, Sissy, me, and various others, who said, "Jeff, it's time. You need to. If you've got the time to spare, you need to step back in. This is going to be a mess."
Yeah.
And he did, and he won it, and did just a 2-year term and out.
Yeah.
But and let us get our act back together.
Yeah.
But if it's interesting because a lot of the radical party members, radical caucus members, of which I am a member, have a real difficult time with Nick Sarwark, and I don't. Nick and I are friends.
And remind me, I apologize. Who's Nick Sarwark?
And Nick is the Nick. Nick is.
He's going to listen to this.
Nick is the national chair, serving an unprecedented 3rd term.
Oh, okay.
You serve 2 terms and move on. And
is he the really libertarian guy I keep hearing about?
Incredibly articulate speaker. However, the pragmatists endorsed him in the most recent run because Nick is all about getting libertarians elected. That's what he wants to do.
Right.
He feels that's the way we should do things. I'm torn. I view it from the standpoint that I do want to see libertarians elected, but no one is going to step up and say, "Yeah, nothing's working. Let's elect libertarians to governors all over the state." senators and congressmen, they should all be libertarians. It's not going to happen.
No.
And I think we need to, like everyone else, we need to pay our dues. We should have, we should have people with credentials that are impeccable that could be president of the United States.
Yeah.
Running for county executive positions.
Yeah.
Do you know Jeff? Why am I forgetting his last name? Riverside County, California.
I've never been there.
Okay, large county.
No, I know.
A huge, absolute massive budget. Jeff Hewitt. Jeff is a Libertarian National Committee member.
That name sounds really familiar.
Jeff was elected county executive of Riverside County, and
as a Libertarian.
Nonpartisan race.
Okay, gotcha.
But the Republicans endorsed him.
Whoa.
Yeah. Jeff is a pragmatist to the core. But if I had to say, Jeff, anarchy or the R's and the D's, he'd say, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. But Jeff started out as a little city council guy in a little tiny town in Riverside County and moved up to the county board. And I didn't move to the county board. He ended up being mayor of his town. And then there was a consortium of mayors, and he was the head of the consortium of mayors. And all of this was internal elections. I mean, he was elected to city council, and the city council elected its own mayor. They chose Jeff.
That's awesome.
And then Jeff went on, and he's been in politics, elected politics, for probably 10, 12, 14 years.
Oh, that's wow.
And he's paid his dues, and he's come up through the system. This is a guy who built swimming pools for a living. And had a solid business and had some time and said, I want to change how things operate in California. What Jeff has going for him is he uses libertarian principles to do things. He does not back down at all. He does things in a libertarian fashion.
Yeah.
When there's a libertarian solution, Jeff discusses that libertarian solution with people and says, I think we ought to do it this way. And people are like, well, Jeff, it's working so far, so go for it.
Yeah.
And everything he's doing is working. And by the slimmest of margins, it took a recount and a half at least, Jeff was elected county executive of Riverside County.
Nice.
And so now we have an opportunity to see the head guy in a county.
Yeah.
If you look at Minnesota, Crystal, which is a first-ring suburb of just off of North Minneapolis, Crystal has had as many as 3 libertarians on their city council at one time now. I think they have 1 or 2 right now.
Yeah.
But they've had very good success beginning to and their whole thing has been scaling back regulation.
Yeah.
Just where can we get government out of things?
Yeah.
In the city of St. Paul, right next door to Minneapolis, I grew up in St. Paul.
Okay.
We had private trash collection. Minneapolis had city trash collection.
Guess which one worked better?
Well, I don't care which one worked better. There's a whole lot of people who just said private trash collection could never work. It did. You moved into your house. You could always tell the people from out of town who moved in because a couple of weeks in, they'd trash out in front. You'd walk up, knock on the door, and say, they didn't tell you. You got to hire a trash company. But the beauty of that is somebody like me, I live alone. With all the recycling that goes out and everything else, every 3 weeks, my trash bag is full enough to put out.
Yeah.
So do I need the Kansas City limit of 2 per week? Everybody else gets to put out 6 for the one that I put out.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Now, recycling, I put everything that's potentially recyclable in the recycling bin. You know, so I am committing some output. There's no doubt. But in terms of the stuff that you get tagged for and the stuff that your taxes are paying to the traditional trash collection for which your earnings taxes in Kansas City are paying, I'm only contributing 1 bag every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And why, if I was in St. Paul, I'd call up Bob's Rubbish and I'd say, I'm not going to put out a lot of trash. Could you stop and see me every 3 weeks?
Yep.
And they'd say, yep, we'll do that. And if Bob doesn't want to do it, Pete next door does.
Yeah.
And then that's the beauty of competition.
Exactly. That's the market. That's the free market. That's how it works.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at is the people who are getting elected into positions of government as libertarians are for the most part coming from the pragmatic side. But I find myself having no difficulties whatsoever with them. I don't have any difficulties with any libertarians unless they're just mean people.
Yeah.
But I don't participate in the...
You're good.
Okay.
I apologize. I was hearing some feedback.
Gotcha. I don't participate in the hardcore libertarian, not so hardcore libertarian side of things. I've worked on all sides of the party. I was on the LNC for 4 years. I chaired the party's technical IT committee. I've worked with people who, most of my IT committee members, the people that I worked with, were not big-time party people. They were libertarians who were interested in helping out that had an IT background.
Mm-hmm.
And invariably, these were people that didn't understand the turf battles that went on in the Libertarian Party and were just there to get stuff done. And that was great.
Those are the best people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not certain that any of them knew that I was on the anarchist fringe of the party. You probably didn't.
No, I didn't at all.
Exactly.
No, I mean, I don't want to, and I'm sorry to interrupt. When we had a pretty late meeting, the last one I attended with Brad Eichstead, and he made a comment, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here for him, but I thought it was so important, and it's so important for every party that I want to repeat it, because what he said was, when I talk to people, I have to realize that I'm talking to a constituency. I have to realize that I would represent a group of people, and I have to keep that in mind. And my beliefs and what I show and what I say and everything else, I would never not answer a question. But my beliefs go further than that. And he went into some very libertarian beliefs that I actually agree with him on legalization of drugs, not just marijuana, past that. And he went into those thoughts, and he's like, but if I center it on that, if I bring that up, just like anything else, that's going to be the focus. It's like the focus has to be what it means. And I just remember leaving that conversation going, he's absolutely right. It's like, and if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Green Party, a Constitution, or you're a Libertarian, you have to understand what that means. And he had a great, I mean, his words were pretty incredible.
He's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I've spoken to, on a couple of occasions, I've spoken to the Jackson County Republican Party on issues, tax issues, property tax issues, and also we were pushing for an audit of the water department at one point in time from the state auditor's office. And I've come and spoken on these issues in the past. And invariably, what people from the Republican Party of Jackson County remember me for is the fact that after the presentation was done, after we talked about tax policy, water policy, audits, all that kind of stuff, invariably something came up about drug policy. And I would say, you know, I think the correct policy is we've lost the war on drugs. We need to legalize this stuff, and we need to let the market do what it needs to do. And parents ought to not let their kids do things that they otherwise wouldn't want them to do. I mean, It doesn't matter. Just because drugs are legal, it doesn't mean that it's the right thing for you to do. I mean, I'm not a drug user. I don't care. I mean, but it doesn't get in my way.
Yeah.
What do people remember me for at the Jackson County Republican Party? For that.
Yeah.
Oh, you've talked about tax policy too? Oh, really? I don't remember that.
But I remember there's one issue that nobody wants to touch, but you did.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it makes absolute sense, because the issues that you, not the issues that you speak on, but the issues that you truly believe in come across to so many people.
Mm-hmm.
And with drug policy, and especially right now, because I don't think there's a person, and maybe I'm wrong, outside of fringe groups, but I don't think there's a person in America that doesn't see that eventually marijuana is going to be federally legalized, and that's going to be a great day, because right now it's a fucking Schedule 1.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
If you look at, you know, I'm not a doctor. I don't know if any of these studies of the benefits of marijuana have validity. I don't care. I come at it. I mean, I'll take somebody's utilitarian argument for why we should legalize. At the end of the day, I'm with the libertarian argument, not the utilitarian argument.
Yeah.
And the libertarian argument is that it's not any of someone else's business what I or you put in our bodies.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter. In your life, it should not matter. Now, where it does matter, and where I have Republican friends who, it's the first thing they say, and I have to agree with them on this, is if you, through your drug use, cost me, the taxpayer, money in some way, then it's inappropriate. But I agree with that on all terms.
Yeah, that's the libertarian argument.
That's exactly.
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's not a drug thing. It's a philosophy thing.
Yeah.
If you harm others financially or otherwise, you are liable for that, far more than the Republicans believe.
Yeah.
a Republican that is in the middle of some sort of a what's a Republican issue that might infringe upon others. Who knows? Regardless,
Outside of the border wall.
that's something like that. Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
The fact that this will be the largest eminent domain project that has ever been in the history of the United States to acquire enough farmland and ranch land currently straddling two countries to be able to actually build a border wall. That's going to be a massive project. And the Republicans, many of the Republicans, just kind of look at their shoes and just say, well, I guess you got to do it. Yeah. Meanwhile, they're going kilo.
Yeah.
On the kilo decision, we got to knock that kilo thing down. We got to, everybody saw the Little Pink Houses video and everything else, and everything's all wonderful. But we have a real good reason for this one. We've got a great reason for taking this land because we can build a wall.
Well, yeah, and that again is to me one of the most. It's the truest libertarian argument in my mind is. If you're having a conversation with somebody and you're a libertarian, and even if you're, as progressive or conservative as they come, I think the libertarian argument that always gets to me, and this is the reason that I will stray on the social contract and social policy, and I don't like this, I don't like that, infighting and the rest, is I always come right back when I hear things like that, because I remember, and I'm sure everybody remembers because it has the benefit of recency, that we have, in the last 10 years, lived in a world where we've had huge Second Amendment fights. We've had a world where marriage was defined as a man and a woman, and thank God the U.S. government defined it that way because we actually have a fucking definition for it. And we've had, we are now, like we were just talking about, or like I brought up, that we're in the middle of a marijuana legalization argument. States and states' rights are taking over, which Republicans fight, but they like the argument but hate what's going on. And you have those three issues that are at the forefront. And what it comes down to, at least from what I see it is, I love me some big government if I agree with what it's doing.
Of course.
And to me, that's the most libertarian thing you can hate is I'm fine with everything you talked about as long as the United States government, which is 530, if you're really looking at 536 people and 9 on the Supreme Court, if you're looking at it that way, they're in charge.
Right.
And even though we're a republic, it's like you have to fight against that. And you have to fight against that with your vote. You have to fight against that with everything you post. Maybe don't hate on somebody that agrees with you 100% or 99% of the time and you fight on the 1%. But that to me was always the biggest issue. And I would tell anybody that would listen, which they weren't that many people, but it was like my biggest thing was, what if I could ensure Second Amendment rights and at the same time legalize gay marriage? Who would fight it? Because if you said Second Amendment rights secured for a century and gay people can get married, what do you think? Like, you would have the weirdest conversation in history. Like, well, which one's more important? None of them.
That's right.
Because it's you.
They're the same fundamental right at the end of the day. It's to
Yeah.
live your life.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. And without government interference.
Right.
Yeah. It's an amazing principle. It's interesting to hear the politics behind the Libertarian Party because you don't really, like when you were talking about the convention, you don't really hear about that with any of the third parties, and Libertarian is by far the biggest third party. But you don't hear about the politics. But I mean, if you read anything on Theodore Roosevelt, that's what that guy was an expert on. He'd go to a convention and dominate because he was the only person that was willing to go toe to toe with everybody.
Well, that's the other thing. You've got probably more registered parliamentarians at a libertarian convention than any other convention. And
Really?
So, oh yeah, and so it gets hardcore because people know what they're doing.
How many are there?
Boy, probably 300 delegates or so, something like that, 400 delegates. I don't recall exactly how many it is, but that sounds about right. I think a typical convention attendance is in the neighborhood of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
The last
That's still a good convention.
It is.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about it is that there are no people that dislike one another. There's some serious...
Except that one guy that was yelling at Sissy.
That's Roger Stone, and Roger's a retread from the Republican Party. Come on, and yeah, Roger was on the payroll, and he had things to do, and the Johnson campaign had cut a deal with a particular candidate to make certain that the people from his state would get seated at the convention. They had a large overage, and part of the deal is he would see the votes for national chair. It didn't happen.
Oh my God, politics is the most fucked up thing in the world.
Well, and national, I mean, I Nick is a friend, and I remember at an LNC meeting 2 summers ago, because it was a full summer before the last convention. We were in Pittsburgh, and he was floating the idea of running again. I said, "You're crazy. You're going to run again?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I view it this way." He said, "I will stand up and support and financially support and physically do everything I can for someone who I feel can do this job better than I can." And he said, "Until then, I'll keep doing it."
Fair enough.
And I think that's exactly the issue. I think there are a lot of people who would say, "Well, you could be." Well, I'll put it this way: he's probably the best spokesman we've had. He's very articulate. Grew up as a software developer, but went to law school shortly thereafter and worked for IJ, the Institute for Justice, and has serious credibility on the libertarian legal side. He worked as a public defender in Denver, Colorado, and then went home. The family has a car business in Phoenix, Arizona, and I believe his dad was ill and went home to run the family car business in Phoenix, Arizona. But Nick is one of those people who will. There will be a long pause, not for effect, because he's really thinking through the issue, and then whatever he has to say will make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You may not agree with it, but it's going to be well thought out, and it's going to make sense, and it's going to be strongly libertarian.
Well, and that's fantastic because, I mean, taking a long pause to think about the issues, to think about what you believe, is something that we've lost.
People can't even do that on Facebook.
No, God, I'm as guilty as anybody else. I mean, I grew up in, I think 2006, 2007 was when I joined Facebook. Like, I was the Facebook generation.
Yeah.
It's like, I cannot imagine if somebody goes back to my old posts, I'm going to look like a freaking idiot.
I still have a Facebook account because I need it. I put events for the party and things like that and everything else. But I have not put a post on Facebook other than some photographs of some birds I took pictures of in India a few years back. I have not put a Facebook post up since 2011.
You're the smartest person on Facebook.
Well, I finally realized that it was probably causing high blood pressure. It's certainly I wasn't convincing anyone of anything.
Yeah.
Why do it?
Right.
There's just.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Anybody that you get in an argument with, and I've done this in the past, and I feel like an idiot for doing it, but you're not convincing somebody on Facebook that you're right. All you're doing is getting into an argument for argument's sake. The only positive I can see from it is if you're somebody that's not good at making arguments,
you can learn.
This guy, me, you can learn how to do it.
Yes, you can learn to formulate an argument, but again, you got to take the pause. And when you're writing, I mean, even at my worst, 2010, 2011, when I finally said enough of it, I'd have a comment that would come in way, way, way late because I'd craft it and formulate it and then sit on it overnight. There was some class that I took in high school or college, probably high school, where they said when you have to write a letter that you're not excited about, write it, put it in the drawer, look at it tomorrow. And there's and that's been done through history.
Yeah.
The concept of not putting yourself out there until you absolutely have to. Give it time. Time heals all wounds, as they say. But at the other side of it is time also allows your brain to kind of work through it and say, yeah, I see why I've got a problem with this guy, but I'm going to save this for another fight.
Yeah. I mean, that was going back to what we talked about a while ago. It's like that's what got Alexander Hamilton in trouble. Yeah. He constantly found solutions and problems that didn't exist yet. And sometimes that's okay. Right. Not in a political argument. It's never okay in a political argument. Right. So what's What do you think the future of the Libertarian Party looks like? I mean, we're in a weird situation.
We are. We need to win some races at levels above what we've won, and that goes against what I've said. I do think we need, and the way we get there is we win a lot more races at the levels that we are winning races, which is city council seats, school board seats, and that sort of thing. We need to show the world that you don't need to be afraid of a libertarian, because both the R's and the D's have strong reason to put it out there that you need to be afraid of libertarians.
Yeah, well, it's the easiest thing in the world to say that you're anarchists.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Life will go just completely to hell in a handbasket if you elect a libertarian for this position.
Yeah.
If we have a libertarian dog catcher, the dogs will run free. It'll be crazy.
That's great.
Well, yeah, and people are afraid of dogs running free. I mean,
oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the big fear.
Yeah.
And I think that means you have to put people now. There are people around. In addition to Jeff Hewitt, there are others who have taken another approach, which is getting elected to or appointed to various state, county boards and that sort of thing, and doing it right, sitting back, listening, trying to figure things out, and then slowly in the back channels kind of work your way through. You're going to have to get, if you're in a deliberative body, you're going to have to get the support of the body if you ever want to make anything happen. So the best way to get the support of the body is to be a rational person who listens to all sides and then says, have you ever considered maybe this, and here's why. And rather than just saying, well, as a libertarian, I think the first thing we ought to do is close the library.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. And the folks up in Crystal, Minnesota, the suburb of Minneapolis, have learned that the hard way, that you can't go and just hammer on expenses and close things. You can beat up regulations, because almost everybody will look at it and say, yeah, it is kind of stupid that we require this for that.
Yeah.
But where you can't win is closing somebody's pet project. 50% of the population is always going to want that thing.
Yeah.
And so you've just alienated 50% of the people. Now that is one of the reasons why government is the size it is, because no one's ever willing to eliminate things. So eventually that has to get done. But you have to build credibility and a circle of comfort within the deliberative body first.
Yeah.
And then once you've got that, then you can begin to push the levers a little bit. And that's how Jeff Hewitt did it, and that worked well for him. But we have guys. I can't think of his name right off the bat, but we have an attorney in Indiana who sits on. He's been on at least one, if not more, boards, governor appointed boards that oversee, sentencing guidelines and things like that.
Yep.
And you just you show that you're credible and a decent person, and that's the best way to approach it. If you just go out acting crazy, you're not going to get there.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I see. And again, there was a certain individual that was brought up that appears to be on the road to running for president on the Libertarian ticket, that kind of has had and I apologize, I should have looked this up before, but he kind of has a non-apology mentality. Like, I'm the ultimate libertarian. This is who I am. That's what we're going to do. And that's what it is. And if you don't like the fact that I don't think your kid should go to a public school, I'm not sorry. If you don't like this, I'm not sorry. And I looked at that and just went, you can have that ultimate belief. You can. And good for you. Boy, are you going to set precedent for this party if you automatically go out and just throw it out there.
It's hard.
And some people like it, and some people love it.
He was an honors grad at Brown.
Yeah, we're not talking about an idiot.
No, he's a bright guy.
Yeah.
His career is in education. He runs a private education organization. Has done exceptionally well with it. I agree with him on a lot of issues. Am I going to go out there and talk about it? No.
Yeah.
I think I have a different approach than he does. I would, in terms of where education goes today, I have different ways of working to achieve the same goals.
Mm-hmm.
I respect his right to say it.
Yeah.
But my guess is that the party is not going to have him be our standard bearer to say it publicly.
Yeah.
So,
do you think there's a balance between him and Gary Johnson? Do you see somebody out there that, and again, like, this is not to, like, and I hate to use this term, but this is not to shit on any candidate, but is there somebody or some at least ideal out there where you would say, this is what our candidate would look like? Because I mean, you said you're on the anarchist side.
I think a guy that looks like Ron Paul, maybe not Ron Paul's age, but I think a guy that has the same message as Ron Paul. We know that message works.
Yeah.
We know that's grown the small L libertarian movement in tremendous ways.
Yeah.
So I guess, as a business guy, when I look at things, what's working?
Yep.
Let's emulate what does my competition do well?
Mm-hmm.
And not that Ron Paul is competition, but he didn't serve as a libertarian.
Yeah. Except for when he should, I don't even want to say he shouldn't have been, like, was it 88 that he ran?
Yep, he did.
And
but he was out of Congress at that point. He was between terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he got into a fight with some, like, one of the most famous videos I've seen. It's like anytime you Google Ron Paul, it's like the video of him talking about the war on drugs. And it's like, you should just legalize all of it. And the guy's like, we shouldn't do that. It is not the Christian thing to do. It's not the right thing to do. And you just look at it and go, yeah, because the war on drugs has worked out so well for all of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that Ron Paul is Mr. Libertarian because he does come at it from a libertarian angle. He knows how to sell it to Republicans from a utilitarian angle.
Yeah.
But he comes at it, his approach is libertarian. Is there somebody out there like that? The problem is that we keep picking up guys in the Republican Party. So whether it's a Thomas Massey or a Justin Amash or a Rand Paul, these guys all have solid libertarian leanings, and they've chosen a different path to get there. And it's very difficult in the United States to change parties.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't work that well.
Yeah.
Especially to change to a third party. If you're going to go from the R's to the D's, so be it. I mean, I get that, but actually, I don't get it. I mean, it's so weird.
That's an even
so
stranger
weird.
transition
It
because
is.
at this point they're so far left and so far right.
Yeah, it's so odd.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they all want the same things.
Yeah.
They really do. And
Get
what
monies.
what we need to do as libertarians, we have the responsibility of showing people that there's another way. We don't want what the R's and the D's want for the most part. Yeah, we want safe schools, we want safe streets, we want all these wonderful things. We don't want to grow the government to make these things happen.
Yeah.
We don't want people to be tax slaves. We want people to be encouraged to work, and especially be encouraged to work in something they wish to do. If someone we want to show that the market works. We want to show that we're not, that it's not crazy to believe that in the long run the concept of public schools is probably a dying concept. I mean, if it takes another 150 mass shootings to kill it, it probably will happen. I mean, it's the concept of housing a whole bunch of kids together from grades K through 12 in the thousands sometimes for several hours per day and give them 2 or 3 hours of education along the way. You just got to look at it and say, what's wrong with this model? I mean, my parents who were born my father was born in 1923, my mother in 1931, not alive today, but all the books that I read in college, my father read in junior high and my mother in high school.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have education inflation. We decided 60 years ago, that a college education was a right and everyone should have a college education. Well, once everyone has a college education, the guy who picks up your trash is going to have a college education. So what's next? So now, if you want to be in business, you got to have an MBA. If you want to.
Well, and how many courses? I mean, they had a joke on this 12, 15 years ago about somebody having an MBA and it not being worth anything.
Right.
There was a reason for that joke.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely true. I've had interns from MBA programs, some darn good ones. I had a kid from Kellogg that came in. He was very competent in what he knew. The problem is he didn't know anything. I mean, bright kid, but
Yeah.
had all sorts of wonderful strategy ideas and everything else. We were working for a small business. I mean, small businesses are not about strategy. We're not trying to devour the competition. We're far better off when we talk about where small business is. If you've read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, far better approach.
Yeah.
You need to be monopolizing what you do. Find something that no one else is doing and be really, really, really good at it.
Yeah.
That's where small businesses succeed.
Mm-hmm.
If you just simply want to sell onions, eventually Walmart's going to kick your butt.
Yeah.
So don't sell onions.
Well, yeah, it's like, I mean, Ray Kroc's speech about what his business was the best in that argument.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what do I do to a auditorium full of, I can't remember where he was. It's like, to an auditorium full of very intelligent young people. What do? You make hamburgers. No. My business is real estate.
That's right.
Because when I put one of those in a place, like in my hometown in Raymore is a great example. There was a McDonald's that went in on an area where you were like, eventually this is going to develop. That McDonald's went in, everything around it grew.
Right.
His business was real estate. It had nothing to do with the burger. You can make a better burger at home.
Right.
Can you
But
do it better than he?
He wasn't the guy who started the real estate side, though.
Yeah.
That was another guy who came in at the founder level and didn't stay past 1969 or so.
Yeah.
Ray Kroc was, he was a visionary, and what Ray Kroc really brought to American business was systematization.
Mm-hmm.
Ray Kroc looked at it and said, "Look, we all try our own ways of doing things. What if we have a formula?"
Yeah.
Prior to Ray Kroc, there were franchises, but they were trade name franchises.
Yeah, and that's what he did.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's not just franchises, though. So I would argue that every successful business in the United States, whether they make something, obviously if they make something, they sell something, but whether they retail something or whether they just manufacture and sell through distribution or whatever it is they do, you can find Ray Kroc lessons in every successful business.
Yeah.
And he created the business model franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to him, it was trade name franchising, and if you can sell chicken if you want under my label. That's just fine. It's the trade name, and I make my money on that.
He made it repeatable.
He made it repeatable. He lowered the bar to success.
Yeah.
I know people that had no business training whatsoever that saved their money, bought a McDonald's franchise, and became wealthy off of a McDonald's franchise or two. And they did so because they simply read the book and followed it.
Yeah. Well, and he did that for Henry Ford, like repeatable behavior. Yep. I will never remember the guys that he bought the business from, but it's like they figured out repeatable behavior.
Brothers.
Yeah, McDonald Brothers. So that's probably the stupidest statement I've ever made. Hilarious. Awesome. Can't wait to be on record for that. I don't edit this shit, so it's going to happen. But so McDonald Brothers, he bought that and just saw, like, if I have this, we're good to go. But that was from Henry Ford. And before, I guess very slightly before, but still before him, you had Carnegie and Rockefeller that found the one thing. It's the one thing we're good at. What's the one thing you're good at? Making Standard Oil, something that somebody can burn, and it's always going to be good. Well, so now electricity's taking over because between Edison and Tesla were fucked. What's going to happen? Well, the one chemist that I have in the back room said that there's this really volatile substance that we have, but Henry Ford just made a car, and this will power a fucking car. So we'll sell gasoline, and now we're going to make even more money and more money and more money. It was about, it's Rockefeller, he's such an interesting individual because he was really a businessman at his core. He wasn't a chemist. He wasn't anything else. He was a businessman. And so when it came to refining, it's like, everybody's striking oil. I don't want to do that. What do? I can refine it. Now, electricity's happening. What do I do? What's the derivative product that I have? The thing that I can't get rid of? Gasoline. Mm-hmm. We're going to do it. Every single one of these major entrepreneurs, up to Elon Musk, has just been creating stuff that really it's all about principle. It's not about the product.
Right.
And
Well, that almost every successful business, there is a model for business success, and it rarely involves the technical nature of the business.
yeah.
It's all about the process of it being a business.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Gerber's E-Myth Revisited
Mm-hmm.
is probably the absolute best example. If you go through and read that book or listen to the audio book of it, it's a great example told in story form for the most part of how to create. I mean, he talks about franchising, but he's really
Mm-hmm.
talking about it from the single business level. How do you take your business and make it succeed? Well, basically, you make it franchisable. If you can make your business franchisable, you don't ever have to franchise it. Your business will be successful.
Yeah.
If you build it that way correctly.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because it's a scientific method incarnate. It's we have a sample size. It works.
Mm-hmm.
I bet if we take this from Kansas City and put it in Denver, it's going to work too.
Right.
So.
And just the concept of not having too many cooks spoiling the broth and everything else. Building an org chart that tells you what needs to do. Doing the basic stuff first. So many businesses start out because, the story of the E-Myth Revisited, Sarah makes pies. Sarah likes making pies, so she started a business making pies. Pretty soon the business owns Sarah. And Michael Gerber talks her through the process of how she creates a business out of selling pies.
Yeah.
And it's not about selling pies. It's not about making pies. It's about running a business. And if your passion isn't ultimately, if your passion from the original trade that dragged you into business, if your passion doesn't become the business, you're never going to succeed. You need to work for somebody else.
Yeah. Or at least understand that you have limitations.
Yeah.
Like, if you're okay having a great restaurant and you have 100 seats and those 100 seats are filled every night and you like working there, that's fine.
But even that's fine. But even to do that successfully, it takes a business sense to make it happen.
Yeah.
It'll eat you up if you can't cross that line. If you're in the back cooking, who's out front taking the money?
Yeah.
Who's making certain the customers are happy?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be on top of all of it.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
So if you had one message, not just for libertarianism, but just for people in general, when you look at politics and life and everything else, because I think we've crossed a lot of different things in this conversation. If you had one, sum up your entire life in one sentence is what I'm asking. No, but I mean, if you had one overall, overarching comment that if you met somebody and you said, here's the way that you need to approach it, because this is, again, one of my favorite things about libertarianism. If you want to do something, you should have every ability to do it. And there shouldn't be limitations. And if there are limitations, it has to do with your interaction with somebody else. If you're negatively affecting somebody, we need to look at that. Because if you win in business, you're negatively affecting somebody, but you won.
Maybe.
Yeah, true. But if you had to talk about it as a guiding principle, not necessarily just with what you've done, but as just how you feel about it and what brought you to this statement, this point, what would it be?
I think the best way to put it is I'm involved in the political process to make politics something that is no longer important to anyone. And I'll explain that without going ridiculously off the rails.
I can go in the rabbit hole. It's fine.
Okay. The libertarian philosophy, my philosophy, is that government shouldn't be important to you. You may believe that government is a necessary evil. You may believe it's not necessary at all. That's up to you. But I think we can all agree that government occupies too much of our lives for the most part, whether it's paying our taxes, following our regulations, whatever all it is. It's a deal that was promised to us that was going to make our lives better by making them more complicated and more expensive, and it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
When people say to me, well, why should I try the libertarian way? And I say, well, the Democrats and the Republicans have been at this I mean, the Republicans only since the Civil War, but they really did evolve directly out of the Whigs. So we can honestly say
Yeah.
that the two political parties that are in power in this country collectively as a single unit have been in power for almost its entire existence, with about a 10-year span where they weren't in power.
Mm-hmm.
Are you happy with what they've accomplished? Clearly there are some things that have worked well.
Yeah.
This country has unimaginable wealth when compared to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
We have abundant resources. We have abundant talent. As Peter Thiel would say and did say in 0 to 1, we're still an optimistic country. There are a lot of countries that aren't optimistic.
Yeah.
We've lost our way in many ways, and we've lost our way because we've lost our way to government and a reliance on government. As libertarians, as small government conservatives would agree with us on, it's about freedom and liberty. Well, government doesn't take away freedom unless you break the law. Government doesn't take away freedom, and it doesn't take away liberty. It takes away responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have, once you no longer have the responsibility of choosing where to buy your groceries, where to buy your shoes, what to manufacture, what to eat, once you lose those, you're losing the liberties that allowed you to choose what to manufacture, what to eat, where to live, what to do with your working day. Human beings want to be free. Human beings want to make decisions. We're complex animals. We want to do things. We want to take care of people. We want to live happy lives. And when I mean happy, we want the pursuit of happiness, of what we want to do. We don't do well caged up. Where our government in this country and for the vast majority of the world is going is a philosophy of cradle to grave security.
Mm-hmm.
We'll never be bombed. We'll never let anything happen bad to you. We'll kill you if it looks like something bad is going to happen to you. Don't worry, we'll kill you.
Yeah.
I think there's sadly, I think that the percentage of people that want to think for themselves and do for themselves is less than it was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's a basic human trait, and it's a trait that if we would teach self-reliance in our schools, and if we would preach self-reliance, in our churches and everywhere else, I think we'd get ourselves back to a level where we would look at government and say, yes, that's very nice. These are thieves who want to be paid. They want their share.
Yeah.
And we're going to likely have to continue to pay these thieves going forward, but they don't have to run our lives. They don't have to be a major imposition upon us. We just give them the cash they want. We send them on their way. Occasionally we tar and feather them when they're really bad.
Yep.
Or like in the state of Illinois, we just lock them up. and we're all happy on our way. But there's what they have sold us. What they have sold us as this wonderful, great protection racket, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
Be it Social Security, be it police forces, be it national security, whatever it is, pick your piece of it. None of it's worked out like they planned. None of it's been anywhere near as good as what we were sold.
Yeah.
And none of it's anywhere near as good as what we're paying.
Yeah.
What we're paying for.
Well, and I think that's, in my mind at least, that's the big issue. If we're responsible for not even, 3.4 trillion because we continue to have to borrow, and we're still not satisfied,
Right.
that's more than any people in the history of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not happy with it. We should be the happiest people in the world,
I agree.
and we're not. And what does that tell you? We give way too much responsibility to an organization that has zero credit for having that responsibility.
Right.
Like they should not, you shouldn't be satisfied in any way, shape, or form. And yet we continue to rely on it because, and I think this is one of the bigger issues, is we're so used to it that, I mean, you said cradle to grave. It's absolutely true. But we almost feel like we're given the sensation of the cradle and we don't recognize it until it's too late.
Right.
Like, it's very comfortable. It's very nice.
Well, think of it this way. We've now put students into a situation we've drilled into the heads of students from grade school and before grade school that success is going to college.
Yeah.
And the price of going to college is now years and years and years of deep debt.
Yeah.
A lot of students are never going to pay their way out of.
Mm-mm. And it's debt you can't get rid of. You can get rid of so much debt, you can't get rid of that debt. Yeah.
The absolute worst of it is what I'm seeing now, the next phase of this, where employers are starting to look at it, and you can basically bargain your future out with an employer. You can say, you'll pay my college education or some percentage of my college education. I'll come to work for you, and I'll pay you. I'll give you a percentage of my earnings. Or not
the earnings that they determine anyway.
Well, no, even if it's somebody else,
Yeah.
you could get where this will go ultimately. We'll securitize this.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
It'll be a derivative somewhere in the market.
Exactly, and I'll be able to buy kids.
Yeah.
Well, where does the slavery part of this kick in?
Well, and the way I think of it is, like, I understood the housing crisis because you had an asset behind it.
Right.
And this is, to me, this is the most messed up part about our education system is we treat every degree equally, and we also treat the degrees like they're a car,
Right.
or like they're a house or anything else where there's an asset behind it. And you can make a flowery speech about how every student is an asset and it's a great thing, but there's and I really wish I remembered at the time, there was a musical on Broadway. It was like Sesame Street, but very inappropriate. And there's an entire song about what an English degree is worth.
Yeah.
And every time I think about that song, I think about the fact that there is a government secured loan for
every English degree.
Every English degree.
Yeah.
And every, like, name it, like, and it's not even the bad degrees.
Right.
Or, what I would say are the bad degrees. It's every degree. It's like every degree where there's a percentage that you look at and say 70% of people don't make any more than this much money, and yet we're we're making sure that these degrees are backed up. The same way a house is.
You're making a utilitarian argument.
Mm-hmm.
It makes no economic sense, and I agree with you entirely. But think of it from a moral standpoint. Morally, we're at some point in time, people, a lot of them, probably not all of them, but many of them will figure out at some point in time that they've been duped.
Yeah.
That they spent this money, they got this degree, they made mom and dad happy, but more than anything, they just made society happy because society was the one that pushed mom and dad into going that direction in the first
Mm-hmm.
place. And now they have, the worst part here is they don't just have a debt. Actually, they don't have a debt. They're paying some sort of a derivative for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
They're paying, they owe into some derivative stream
Mm-hmm.
a percentage of their income. And if they make a whole bunch of money, they got to pay more.
Yeah.
If they make just a little bit of money, they don't have to pay much. What sort of incentive is that? We know what that does. We know what that does right now in terms of tax policy. When you put a hard break at a particular spot on a graduated income tax scale, and if somebody's got a break between 125 and 130, and if their taxes go up enough at 130,
Mm-hmm.
where it's uneconomic to get there, they'll say, "I'll stay at 125."
Yeah.
Perfectly happy there.
Yeah, I'll reduce hours. I'll do whatever.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'll do what's necessary. You think we aren't going to see a productivity loss due to this? When
100%.
When people look at it and they're like, wait a second, I'm giving that much to a bunch of unnamed Wall Streeters that bet on my education? Screw them.
Yeah. Well, and the moment they say screw them, they're going to be in that same job contributing to their 401k, and their 401k is going to have part of that in there.
Yeah. It's morally wrong to indenture people for life.
Yeah.
It's just wrong.
Yeah.
So how do you get past it? I mean, you got, Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs.
Yeah.
He's one of the few people who's out there saying,
We don't have plumbers.
we don't have plumbers.
We need plumbers.
Average age of a welder in this country is 62 years old.
Yeah. And that's terrifying.
It's terrifying. Absolutely. It's
Especially when you're talking about spending $1 trillion to $2 trillion on infrastructure.
Absolutely.
It's like you're saying you don't need sheet metal workers. You're saying you don't need plumbers. You're saying you don't need electricians.
Exactly.
Any of those positions. It's like the one positive of that is that hopefully the, air quotes, free market takes over and people eventually realize, like, I can go to trade school, get it paid for, make 70 a year coming out and 100 afterwards being a lineman, and infrastructure's going crazy in the United States and elsewhere.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
For the first time in my lifetime, actually not first time in my lifetime, starting about 1970, to get a job as a professional pilot, you needed a college degree.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of airlines, I don't know who because I just scanned the article this morning, but I saw this in this morning's, I get a lot of aviation cheat sheets and news sheets, and at least one major airline has decided to drop their college requirement.
I don't doubt it, because why do you need to learn?
You want to know that people are intelligent.
Yeah, 100%.
You want to know that people have some cleverness, but the concept of putting somebody $100,000 in debt to figure out whether or not they're clever or not isn't that great an idea anymore.
Yeah.
You know, there are plenty of good aviation-specific programs out there, and they're overkill because they're still giving you another degree on top of that.
Yeah.
There are an amazing number of an amazing number of pilots that are also aeronautical engineering, which is great. I mean, it's a good thing to do, but there are plenty of people who got a pilot's license at 16 years old and have been flying ever since.
And you'd rather be behind them than anybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, and that's, to me, I really hope that like things like graduate certificates become more important than anything else.
Absolutely. And I think they're there. I mean, I think the explosion in education outside of the mainstream is going to be actually absolutely huge. And I think that the concept of having to have a certificate to get a particular kind of job, it's the union movement of this era.
Yeah.
As unions declined, we're not on camera, but I've got an X going off here, and as union membership has declined, need of certifications and licensing has gone up on the exact same the same slope. That union membership has come down. So we still have a union culture. It's just now the unions aren't giving out the credential. The state boards are giving out those credentials.
Yeah. Which is terrifying for libertarians.
It is. Now, at the same time, I fly airplanes. I don't really have an interest in flying around with people who haven't been adequately trained to fly an airplane.
100%. Yeah.
You know, but that's a private thing.
Yeah.
You know, that's a private thing. I get to make that decision.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not suggesting that people can go and pick up an airplane and fly. They will kill themselves.
Oh yeah.
People will kill themselves.
I mean, I was telling you earlier in the interview, it's like we have to talk about this off air because that's something I've always wanted to do. I've had members of my family, including my grandfather, that were, and I've always wanted to since I was that tall.
Sure.
And if you put me on an airplane now, I'd be like, well, if you pull back, I think that goes up, and if you push down, that goes down. But if we're gonna land, you're gonna die.
There is that.
Yeah. No. Well, that's awesome. Well, do you have anything else?
I don't. I appreciate the opportunity to chat like this, and maybe someday we'll do it again with another topic.
Definitely.
I have a bunch, so
I like it.
Talk about it.
You can come on anytime. We can make a weekly series. No, I think I get the idea, and you might disagree with me, but I get the idea that the next year and a half or so are going to be reasons for us to have more conversations.
Yeah, it's going to get interesting. We'll see who steps up to the plate for the LP. You know, again, I don't care who the presidential candidate is. We're probably not going to make a big impact, but we're getting to a point. I really thought, and maybe a second Trump administration will do it, but I really thought that we'd see some Republicans after the 2018s leave the Republican Party and join the LP, elected Republicans.
Yeah, that's what happened in 07, 08.
Well, but they were all statewide people. I think
True.
I expected to potentially see some national level people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, at this point in time, Justin Amash doesn't call himself a Republican. He calls himself a libertarian.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're going to start to see some of these things happen. I think the issue right now, the Trump mania scares the absolute crap out of elected Republicans. It's like, what do we do? Who do we try? Do we have to look like this guy or not?
Well, do you think part of that, and I'm sorry for interjecting, but do you think part of that, the fact that more people haven't jumped ship, is because of how far left the Democratic Party has gone? It's like, well,
yeah, it's still a protective thing.
And normally, in other times, I would jump ship and go Democrat and just be a blue dog Democrat and call it a day. But man, it really, like, at least to me, it seems like it's as far right as it's gone. And with Trump, it's a totally different direction. But it was going far right with the Tea Party movement.
Yeah.
and people went left. But then when they went left, the party went left.
Big time.
And so when I see that, I think there's no safe ocean to jump into now.
Well,
It's two islands, and they think that, being in the middle is shark-infested waters when it might be paradise.
Right. I agree with you, but it's as bad on the left.
Yeah.
You've got I usually like to use people's names, so I can never remember her whole name. But AOC, the gal from New York.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Right. She and her team have made it abundantly clear that they're going to go after any Democrat who's not a socialist.
Yeah.
Well, when you do that, I mean, now you're scaring the crap out of the Democrats. I mean, they all got the better paying jobs than they could find in the private sector.
Oh yeah.
And they don't have to do any work.
Mm-hmm.
They just have to get reelected every 2 years. But if she starts targeting, I think her 15 minutes are probably going to be up relatively soon. I don't think she's maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think she's going to be more than a 2-term congressperson, because she appears to be, and it's not. It's pretty widespread, the media on this right now. It appears that she's not taking care of her constituents.
Yeah.
And you can go back to Ron Paul and look at this. The reason Ron Paul was allowed to be a libertarian gadfly in the Congress was because he took wonderful care of his constituents.
Yeah.
It was all about constituent service.
Yep.
And they still rave about what wonderful people he had in his office in D.C., but mostly in Sugar Land, Texas.
Yeah. 100%.
Absolutely. And AOC didn't even open up offices for a while and that sort of thing.
She fought. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, the headline is always the political piece.
Right.
And she cost them 25,000 jobs.
Yes.
And no matter what side you're on, if you agree, disagree, like it, don't like it, they're going to always look at it as you cost us 25,000 jobs.
Right.
And the thing, my biggest issue,
and you didn't even open up an office to talk about it.
exactly. And my biggest issue since she's been there has been, it's just the ineptitude. Because when she came out with the Green New Deal, and I talked about this on another podcast, but I will never, if I were her constituent, I would never forgive her for this, because she had a couple of things in the Green New Deal that even in my I hate government position, looked at and went, there are some really intelligent arguments here. When she's talked, the whole cow flatulence issue that was in the Green New Deal, it's like, it looks stupid. It looks like an idiotic issue. But when you look at it for what it is, from a scientific, biologic, physiologic perspective, cows shouldn't be fed corn, by the way, that's subsidized by the federal government.
Absolutely.
Because corn creates methane within their system. As you can imagine, it comes out as farts.
Right.
And if they were on a grass-fed diet, which they have always been on, and evolution has built them to do that, it wouldn't do anything.
Right.
If you present it that way, it's an intelligent argument. When you present it in other ways and say that planes shouldn't use jet fuel, you lose all credibility.
You can't step up. You can't say planes shouldn't use jet fuel and then hop on a jet and go somewhere.
Exactly.
This is the Davos crowd showing up to Davos to talk about how we're destroying the environment, and each one brings their own jet.
Yeah, 100%.
Can't do it.
No, no, and you have to. I mean, you have to be able. There are a lot of things. Once you get elected, and I'll give every senator and representative that much credit. You can bullshit right up until the moment that you represent a people, and the moment that you represent a constituency, you have to be smarter than me.
Right.
And it can be you hire every advisor you can, and you become intelligent. Sure. Fantastic. Sure. You can do anything you need to, but you can't do that.
Right.
And that's where she fucked up.
Yeah, I think it's a short-term deal.
Yep.
I've watched the left do this so many times. I mean, I'm 58 years old. I watched George McGovern in '72, and the liberals destroyed the Democratic Party, and yeah, they got Jimmy Carter in '76, but they Jimmy was a nice man. They could have had far better people,
mm-hmm.
but they went above and beyond, and it cost them.
Yeah, politics is a long-term fight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, another one of the individuals that you can agree with or not, but I thought it was a wonderful point Ben Shapiro was talking about when he was part of the Never Trump movement. He was talking about It's like when somebody would ask him, like, well, if you're wrong or if you lose when we get Hillary, and he was like, well, if we don't lose in 76, or if we win in 76, we don't get Reagan. If we lose in this point, or if we win in this election, we don't get this person. It was like, sometimes, as bad as it sounds, you've got to hit the low to get the high.
Right.
And whether, again, you agree or disagree with who gets elected and who doesn't,
Sure.
politics is a long game. There's 4 years between elections, and most people these days seem to get elected for 8 years at a time.
That's right. We're on about I've sort of mapped it out. Post-Second World War, we're on about a 9.5 to 10-year cycle of interest.
Yeah.
And for some that works out to 8 years, some works out to 12 years. We had Bush, Reagan, Reagan, Bush. But essentially, you've got about 10 years of time where you're in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And they talk about how could Donald Trump be elected? Well, it was pretty inevitable. He had to really screw up to not get elected, and he's going to have to really screw up. I mean, the fact that Mueller didn't take him down is literally. I mean,
that's
odds,
a moment.
Well, and now the zealots that want to impeach have looked at it and said, well, maybe we should just beat him at the ballot box. Most of them are bright enough to know. At the end of the day, they understand statistics. They're in the business of getting elected and reelected. They know what the odds are against taking out a sitting president. The one thing that would go against Trump at this point in time would be a recession. There's probably nothing more. His jawboning for a decrease in interest rates is all about keeping the economic boom alive.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to be president for a second term. Can't imagine why, but assuming that the economy stays whole, there's not a one who can beat him. And what's comical is, according to today's numbers, Biden is ahead.
Yeah, and so is Hillary.
Yeah, but Biden is ahead of the Democratic field.
After being on campaign for 6 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't think the Democrats are going to go all out crazy, and I don't think they're going to see anybody who's really going to be able to make a stand against him. I think it's an 8-year deal, no matter how you look at it.
I totally agree. I mean, when it was finally down to he and Hillary, I remember having a conversation. I probably bring this up too much, but I had a conversation with my wife because she was like, I don't think there's any chance. And I said, I do, and here's why. If you really break down, again, going back to the numbers, if you really break down the numbers, there is one sector in America that votes, and they vote constantly, and that is the middle class, especially blue-collar, white male.
Mm-hmm.
And he appealed to that group. Like, I can't think of the last person that did.
Reagan.
Probably Reagan.
Right.
So if you're looking at that, they vote. They vote. I mean, I'm 32, but I'm like the elder of the millennial generation.
Sure.
We don't vote.
Right.
Like it, and I hate it, and it sucks because I've been at every ballot box as long as I can remember, but we don't vote.
Right.
They do. My dad, blue collar, white male, American,
Shows up to vote.
always.
Absolutely. And that's,
And if you appeal to that, you're going to win. And especially at this point, it's like Biden's a great politician. Like, you can't get around it. You can agree, disagree with him, and I do on a number of issues. That guy is a great politician. That's the reason he's been around for a long time. But right now, he represents a very far left Democratic Party. And I feel like he's going to try to bring him back, but the moment you try to bring him back,
I don't know how much he tries to bring him back. If you look at Biden's history, he was out there with the rest of them.
Yeah.
The majority of it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I feel like he's going to try to bring it back because he sees the ebbs and flows. He sees the tides come in and out. But I could be wrong, and we could just have a really entertaining election.
I'm sure it will be regardless.
It's going to be fun. All right, well, you'll come back on?
I will.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.